I never expected anything unusual the day Samir called. He was an old friend from college, reliable, funny, and someone I trusted without a second thought. His request was simple. His cousin Alina had just moved to the city and needed a place to stay for a few days while she figured things out. Samir promised she wouldn't be any trouble. I had an extra room, and I owed him a few favors anyway, so I agreed. When Alina arrived, she was polite, soft-spoken, and carried herself with a quiet confidence. She didn't bring much, just a small suitcase and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I helped her settle in, showed her around the apartment, and tried not to overthink the whole situation. She thanked me more than necessary, always adding a little laugh that seemed like a shield. Over the next few days, I noticed how easy it was to talk to her. We started having breakfast together, quick chats turning into longer conversations. She was curious, smart, and had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. She asked questions, listened without interrupting, and her presence was unexpectedly comforting. I began to look forward to our talks more than I should have. It wasn't long before we shared small routines. I'd get back from work, and she'd be in the kitchen trying out some new recipe, usually something her mother used to make. We'd eat together, talk about our days, laugh about silly things like bad TV shows or the strange neighbors. It started to feel normal, comfortable, and maybe a little too personal. One evening, after dinner, she told me a story about how she used to spend summers in the mountains with her grandparents. She spoke with nostalgia, eyes distant, voice calm. Then she fell silent for a moment and stared at the floor. I waited, not wanting to interrupt her thoughts. When she looked up, her expression was soft, thoughtful. "You remind me of him," she said quietly. I didn't ask who she meant. We just sat there in the silence that followed, not needing to fill it. That night, I caught myself thinking about her more than I should. It wasn't just that she was beautiful, though it was the way she made me feel seen, understood. It had been a long time since anyone had made me feel that way. Still, I told myself not to get carried away. She was my friend's cousin. She was only here temporarily. She probably didn't see me that way. But the more time we spent together, the harder it became to believe that what was happening between us was nothing. There was a pull, unspoken but undeniable. And though I tried to ignore it, part of me didn't want to. I wasn't sure where it was going. All I knew was something had changed, and I didn't have the strength, or maybe the will, to stop it. Days turned into weeks, and Alina was still there. I didn't ask why she hadn't found her own place yet. Truthfully, I didn't want her to leave. We had fallen into a rhythm that felt natural. She'd be there when I got home. We'd talk about everything from music to philosophy, and sometimes we'd sit in silence that didn't feel awkward at all. It was the kind of closeness that builds without anyone realizing until it's already there. She began opening up more, letting pieces of her story slip through. Her parents had passed away years ago, and she'd been raised by her aunt. She'd gone through a messy breakup before moving here, something she rarely mentioned. I didn't press her. I just listened. I could tell she appreciated that. She said being with me felt easy, like she didn't have to try so hard. I pretended not to hear the weight behind those words. Sometimes, I caught her looking at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Not just looking, studying like she was trying to read something between the lines of who I was. And every time our eyes met unexpectedly, neither of us looked away immediately. The silence between us was getting louder. One rainy afternoon, we stayed in and played cards. It was stupid and fun, and we were both laughing more than we should have. She leaned in close, laughing at something I said, her hand briefly touching mine. She didn't pull back. I didn't move. That tiny gesture told me everything I needed to know. We were crossing a line. The moment didn't escalate. Nothing obvious happened. But after that day, the energy between us shifted. There was more hesitation in our words, more awareness in our movements. She started dressing up a bit more, even when we weren't going anywhere. I found myself thinking about her at work, checking my phone more often, hoping for a message that never came. I told myself this wasn't serious, that I was reading too much into things. But the truth was, I didn't want to be rational anymore. She wasn't just a guest in my apartment. She'd become a constant presence in my thoughts. Everything about her, her laugh, her quiet glances, the way she'd brush her hair back when she was nervous, stuck with me. Late one night, we stayed up talking. She told me she felt safe here, that being around me made her forget all the noise in her head. She rested her head on my shoulder, eyes closed, breathing calm. I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just let the moment be, even though every part of me was screaming that I was falling for her. There were no declarations, no kisses, no dramatic music. But I knew, and I had a feeling she did too. The lines were blurred, and soon someone was going to get hurt. I couldn't keep it in any longer. Everything I felt had been building up, pressing against my chest every time she smiled, every time she laughed at something I said. So one evening I told her. I said I liked her, more than a friend should. I tried to sound calm, measured, but my voice cracked halfway through. I waited, hoping for something, relief, joy, anything that made it all worth it. Instead, she looked at me like she didn't know what to say. She hesitated. Then she spoke carefully, like every word might land wrong. She said she didn't expect this, that she never meant for things to get complicated. She hadn't realized I felt that way. I could tell she was choosing her words to avoid hurting me, but it was already too late for that. She told me there was someone else, someone she'd been trying to move on from. They hadn't spoken in a while, but he'd reached out recently, saying he wanted to fix things. She hadn't made a decision yet. I was a friend. A good friend who made her feel safe when she needed it. That was all. Her honesty hit harder than any lie would have. I couldn't understand how all the moments we'd shared meant something so different to her. It wasn't just in my head. I'd seen it, felt it. She admitted she'd gotten caught up in the comfort, but insisted she never intended to mislead me. I believed her, but that didn't make it easier. I asked her if she had ever felt the same way, even briefly. She looked away, then back at me. It was never supposed to get that far, she said. That was all I needed to hear. I felt stupid, for assuming, for hoping, for thinking this could become something real. I'd let my guard down in the name of kindness, and now I was standing in the wreckage of my own expectations. It wasn't just about the rejection. It was the betrayal of emotional intimacy, of thinking we were both walking toward the same destination when she had already turned around. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask her to leave. I just told her I needed some space. She nodded, quietly gathered her things, and said she'd go stay with a friend for a while. There was no argument, no blame. Just a heavy silence neither of us could fill. The apartment felt hollow after she left. Everything reminded me of her. The blanket she used, the mug she favored, the faint scent of her perfume still lingering in the hallway. I wanted to forget, but every detail screamed her name. I wasn't angry. I was just tired of feeling too much and receiving so little in return. I knew I'd survive. But in that moment, all I could feel was the dull ache of a connection that never really belonged to me. And for the first time in a long while, I wished I'd never said yes to that favor. Weeks passed, and I tried to move on. I buried myself in work, kept my phone on silent, avoided places and routines that reminded me of her. But grief doesn't come with an off switch. It lingers, in quiet mornings, in familiar songs, in the awkward space beside you where someone used to sit. Every now and then, I'd get a message from Samir checking in, but I never mentioned Alina. I couldn't. I didn't trust myself to talk about her without breaking all over again. One evening, I saw her name flash on my screen. Just a short message. Can we talk? I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted answers. The other part didn't want to reopen something that had already cost me too much. After a long pause, I responded with a simple, okay. We agreed to meet at a nearby cafe. When I saw her again, it was like time had both paused and passed too quickly. She looked the same, yet distant, like she belonged to a different part of my life now. She started by apologizing, not just for what happened, but for how it all unfolded. She admitted that she had been confused, unsure, and selfish with my emotions. She said she had gone back to the guy from her past, only to realize she had idealized a version of him that no longer existed. I listened quietly, Not because I was waiting for her to say something specific, but because I needed closure. She told me she hadn't stopped thinking about me, that she missed the comfort we had, the peace. But she didn't say she wanted to come back.
And I didn't ask.
I told her I appreciated her honesty, but the damage had already been done. You can't unfeel betrayal. You can forgive it, maybe, but you can't forget how it made you feel, like you were never really seen for who you were. I told her I wasn't angry anymore. I was just learning to protect my peace. She looked disappointed, but she nodded. We said goodbye with a quiet understanding that some chapters close without a happy ending. As I walked away, I felt something I hadn't in a while, relief. Not because I'd won anything, but because I'd finally let go of something that was never mine to hold. After that day, I focused on rebuilding. I started going out more, met new people, picked up old hobbies I'd forgotten. Life didn't suddenly become perfect, but it started feeling like mine again. I learned that not every connection is meant to last, and not every love story ends with love. Some teach you boundaries. Some teach you self-worth. And some simply remind you to never lose yourself trying to be someone else's safe place. In the end, what mattered most wasn't that she left. It was that I stayed with myself, my dignity, and the quiet strength that came from choosing healing over hope. Let me know if you'd like a title card, voiceover direction, or text formatting for video production.